Welcome back to another episode of Kendall vs. Kendall, presented by JensonUSA.com, where we explore the world of bikes from a few differing perspectives. If this is your first time joining us in this audio world of bikes, my name is Seth Kendall, a longtime bike mechanic / shop manager turned social media and marketing guy for Jenson USA. And today I'm joined by my hugely talented but currently injured co-host, Jeff Kendall Weed. Jeff has worked extensively within the brand side of the bike industry and is arguably one of the most innovative riders on two wheels. So, before we jump into the meat of today's episode, I wanted to welcome you back from Costa Rica.
Yeah, I'm standing here in a sling, wishing I did not have the sling on and that my shoulder felt normal. So the Costa Rica trip was awesome. It was super quick, 72 hours down there, but we tried to pack a lot into those 72 hours. And before any of these, it was a video trip, so the idea was to go someplace new that I, had never been to but had always wanted to go to. And I wasn't sure in Central America, South America, where the best spot would be, and there's so many places to go. So I talked to a bunch of folks, and they said, hey, look, Costa Rica, it's easy to get to. We've got a lot of good contacts down there, and we know you're going to put together a great video if you head down there. The riding's great. The coffee's amazing. Check it out. It's awesome. Totally worthy. So, yeah, I shot the Ibis distributor a phone call, and he said, yeah, come down here. And this is a guy I've been trying to chat up for years at WTB because I was hoping to grow WTB sales in Costa Rica, and I knew he was the guy. So Ibis has been working with him for maybe a year or something now, and he said, definitely come down. So went down there. He introduced us to not just like his buddies, but to everyone in Costa Rica, including guys that ride for his competitors. Like one of the main guys he showed us around was riding a Focus, and that was imported by a very big competing distributor. But the guy that we were with, Oscar, was like, you know what, we need to grow enduro as a whole in Costa Rica, so I can't be super choosy and only connect you to Ibis guys and my guys. You have to meet everyone because the whole scene needs to grow together. And I think that that whole community theme was really strong the whole time we were down there. And there's massive mountains, big volcanoes. We went to 3 very different spots, had lots of amazing coffee. We stayed at a cabin up in the mountains around a 9,000 foot elevation. And there was coffee beans being grown all around the cabin. The guy down the street was doing the roasting. And we literally had coffee that morning that was grown on site. So that was rad.
Sounds amazing.
It was really cool. On the last day of riding down there, it started pouring rain, and I hit a slick spot of clay, super hard pack clay. And nothing had been that hard pack. It was all like just perfect loamy dirt, and then out of nowhere, one weird hard spot, wheels washed out from under me, landed on the shoulder, broke the acromion, which is like the front of the scapula, I believe, and it's just, it's broken off, and they said no surgery at this point, but yeah, it does not feel good.
Yeah, I've had several shoulder injuries over the years, none where I've had to have surgery, luckily, but several AC separations, and I feel your pain fully. I actually had one earlier this year, pretty mild one, but it took several weeks to recover, so wishing you the best on that. Do you have a recovery time?
Yeah, I don't know. They said about 2 months, and I did have an AC separation with this, but it was a pretty minor one. And then the other shoulder, the good shoulder, that's the example, has been separated far worse many years ago, so they match now.
You got the nice droop going on.
Yeah, on both sides, so it's all good.
Awesome. Well, stoked to have you back, even if it is injured. We're super excited to see what did come out of that short video trip. Just can't wait to see that content and everything, and we'll be looking for that on your YouTube, Instagram, all those different places.
Thanks. It's going to be rad. You'll be stoked. Should we move into this podcast?
Yeah, let's get podcasting.
Cool. So this whole podcast is aimed at exploring the world of bikes and discussing who, what, how, why, all about this most rad addiction. If you guys haven't yet, check out the earlier episodes. They're up on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play. Leave us feedback for any future topics you want us to cover. We're super receptive to that. And today we're going to take on a question that came up in our last set of episodes when we're talking about wheel sizes and standards, since a lot of those standards came along with those wheel sizes. And basically, the question was asked, should your bike accentuate your strengths or hide your weaknesses?
Yeah, so this question actually came up in a conversation between me and my really good buddy, who I've mentioned here several times, Andy McMullen. And during one of our many weekly phone calls where we were mostly discussing bikes and van projects that we're working on, Andy and I started talking about like this question of, should we play to our strengths or should we play to our weaknesses when we're building bikes? And so Andy and I are both pretty evenly talented riders, but in very different ways. I lean towards the jumping and descending side, while he leans towards the techie and nimble side. We both wanted to improve in the areas that we're not talented in. And so this is where this question came up. Like, do you cater to your talents, or do you build your bikes in such a way that they challenge your weaknesses so that you improve those areas? So Jeff, with that kind of a background and concept here, what do you see as some of the most key areas where a rider can either enhance his or her strengths or cater to improving their weaknesses?
Right. There's so many different categories we can apply this idea to. And I think we got to kind of back up a little bit and think like, all right, what is this rider doing? Are they a competitive racer? Are they a Sunday shredder? Do they ride twice a week with their friends, drink beer on the trail, and just want to have a good time? Like, what's going on here? So first, there's that. But there's several aspects that we got to talk about in this discussion. So let's get down to kind of the first instance. So at the very basic level, should folks be considering a full suspension bike or just a hardtail?
Yeah, most definitely. This has been a question I've asked myself a ton over my riding career, and generally the answer for me has always been a full suspension, and this is because I love the down and I love jumping and getting gnarly. But again, my buddy Andy challenged me on this and forced me, in a sense, to end up purchasing several hardtails now over the years. And I have to say, man, like, it has done wonders for what I am able to do both on a hardtail, but actually my riding has improved a ton on my full squishes because of it. So for me, the answer is both. But I realized that we have to really like ask the question of like, yeah, who are you as a rider? Are you out there to like get shreddy and gnar? And if so, are you new to this? Because a full squish is going to be much more forgiving. It inspires confidence. It allows you to go faster and bigger with less consequence generally. The margins aren't quite so tight, whereas a hardtail will really make you hone in on some of the skills that you need, like choosing your line, landing perfectly off jumps and popping with really quick responsive rear end. But that margin of error is tighter, right? So
razor edge.
Yeah. So you got to ask, like, man, which way do I want to go? And so I've actually pushed a lot of people locally onto decent, this is kind of newish riders, but onto decent level full squishes, because it allows them to build that confidence early. And then as they grow, I actually push them to pick up hardtails so that they can refine those skills once they kind of have their confidence and their basics down. And I'm not sure if that's the right method. It's what I've been going with.
Sure, but that method looks at like their weakness is not being able to have the confidence to really start enjoying riding, the confidence to really send it through the rocks. So a full suspension bike is going to help them build confidence. So that's the weakness that the bike is overcoming. And then I was thinking about like folks that come into mountain biking from, say, a BMX background. Like, there's a lot of younger folks that are in this category too, that are really comfortable with jumping on their BMX bike, and they're getting into the mountain bike side of things, and they're thinking, what bike should I get? If I get a hardtail, I know how to jump it. I can definitely hit all these jumpy trails in this hardtail, no problem. So that's playing to their strength.
Yeah.
Now, if they'd gotten a full suspension bike, it might make cornering a little bit easier with that extra traction, and then braking in a hot hurry. BMX bikes, you've got to brake and you got to modulate it, but you're not looking at different tractions. You're not looking at a bunch of loose rocks in the middle of a berm, because that doesn't really happen in BMX. So it's like that would be a way for them to hide their weaknesses, I guess you could say. So there's good arguments for both sides there. I came into it from the BMX side, so my first bike is a hardtail, and that was really playing towards my strengths of jumping and all that.
Yeah. And I think that argument has really played out for me personally in, I've shared that I've joined into the BMX world, and poorly. But, I go to my skate park with my little 20-incher, and the translation of skills with that bike and my hardtail are really similar. I mean, they're very different because the wheel sizes being so drastically different. But there's a lot of the ways that you pop and pump with that rigid rear end that really plays similarly. And so it's definitely cool to see that happening in somebody who, I've been riding for a long time, and I'm pretty decent. I don't want to like toot my horn too much, but I'm a decent rider. I'm not the worst person out there. So I think there is something to it that playing to your weakness really does refine that skill. And then there's something to kind of letting your strengths come through, or giving you that ability to play to your strengths to refine things. So I think it's two different paths that get to the same conclusion, just differently. And so I'm not sure.
I think the shared conclusion would be that you have to own more than one bike. You're blowing it if you only have one bike.
N+1.
Yeah, exactly. But one thing I think is worth mentioning too, a lot of so getting to the guy who rides twice a week, back in the Bay Area, I knew many folks that would do this. And the riding in the Bay Area is fairly mountainous, lots of 3,000 foot high hills. You could call them mountains if you live on the East Coast, I guess. But yeah. Anyhow, that's quite a bit of elevation. And so a lot of folks will do a group ride, say like on a Wednesday night, and they'll all ride up the hill together. And chances are it's going to be mostly dudes and probably pretty competitive. And they'll probably be chit-chatting and acting like they don't take it seriously. But someone's going to get to the top of that climb first. So then
someone's Strava's ticking.
Yeah, there's always a Strava thing, but when there's this group ride mentality, I could definitely see someone who's looking at, all right, I'm riding with my buddies twice a week. We do this big hill climb ride together, where we ride up the mountain for 45 minutes, an hour, or whatever, and then we bomb back down whatever trail. And the highlight of the ride is probably the social ride up. So they're thinking, should I get the hardtail to be sure I can be at the front end of the pack? And, should I play to my strengths of climbing in this group, or maybe hide the weakness of not being a good climber and getting the better climbing hardtail? Or someone else might say, hey, this group ride, no one's really pinning it on the climb, but everyone's charging the descent. So you got to think about a little bit, too, what your purpose is for your new sweet bike.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we see that with the different types of riding, right? Like enduro, like using that literally, not just as a cool term, right? Like if you're an enduro rider racer, you definitely aren't playing to the strengths or to the weakness of climbing, because that's not a timed stage, right? You're playing to the strengths of your descending.
Well, so, I would say that some of these enduro races are so long now. Like I'm seeing some 35-mile long enduro loops. That's a long time to be out in the woods. So if you can have a 35-pound bike or a 27-pound bike, that 27-pounder would be, half an hour faster overall?
Yeah. Yeah, so man, this is complicated.
It is, yeah. That's why we're
just
talking about
it. Just so you know, to the listeners, I'm not sure we have the answer here. We just think this is a really important question to ask at so many different levels. Because as you can see, we've done it a couple of different ways, but yeah, it really comes down to your specific situations and the type of riding you're looking for. And, for me, I'm always going to cater more towards the all mountain side of things. But with that being said, I find that, I like to challenge that because it does build that skill set. So I think it really comes down to, is this about your once a week, twice a week sort of riding? Is this where you're trying to improve a skill set? Like specifically, you're trying to hone in on stuff? Are you a racer? Like, I think those questions are really crucial to be answered in order to figure out what the answer to this is.
And the racers have a whole different cup of tea to figure out, because there's like the guys that are racing 24-hour events, cross-country things, enduros. And as I was thinking about this topic this morning, it's changed a lot in the last 5 years. So just 10 years ago, there really weren't enduro races. There was cross-country, there was downhill. People were starting to think about something called Super D, and here and there you'd see a dropper seat post. So this is all pretty recent. Excuse me.
No problem.
But yeah, so if you're, as a racer, I would often come into this with, all right, what am I going to do? Am I going to put a build up a really lightweight bike that I can still get down the enduro race course in one piece? Or am I going to build up a really bomber bike so I can really do well on the gnarlier and more technical sections? What's going to end up doing better for me? And I've spent way too much time putting together both types of bikes, the ultra spindly, lightweight, like 2.2 tires, 120 travel front and rear, like real minimalist, like shouldn't really be raced enduro, but at the same time, if there's any climbing involved or any flat sections, that can be like minutes faster than the bigger bike. So
yeah, and I think this plays out a lot too in the racer category, where you have guys who are enduro style racers, right, where it is kind of a mixed thing, but it's primarily looking at the downhill times. And then you have cross country riders who are kind of doing the opposite, right? There's less downhill. It's more about that overall top speed. And I actually saw a while back a video where they compared adding a dropper post to an XC bike to see if they could improve their downhill times. And it was significant what happened. And I sat there going, dropper post way more than a, super small carbon seat post on your rigid or hardtail bike. But are your gains going to be so much more over your competition, who is probably pretty evenly matched with you on the climbs? Is it going to be so much more beneficial to put a little bit of mass on your bike, add a dropper post, and bomb these sections downhill and make up all that time against your competition? And vice versa for enduro, right?
That really depends on the rider for the cross-country thing, though, because I raced a ton of cross-country over the years. Haven't recently, and I've never been that good at it, but I raced a lot of single-speed cross-country because that plays more to your strengths if you're, like, kind of heavier and musclier and more into technical stuff. So on the single-speed side of things, I would never run a dropper post on that bike, especially in a race situation.
Man, I love my dropper on my single speed.
Oh man, it might be fun to ride with, but I would never race with it because my bike is going to explode. As soon as I start putting that saddle down 5 inches or whatever, then I can start jumping large sections of trail. Those lightweight little cross-country wheels that I desperately need on the long climbs, they're not going to survive. If I land it all sideways, they're going to taco. And those light little tires that are 400 grams a piece, lighter than my heavier tires, they're great on the climbs, which is where 95% of the race is going to be won on. But they're going to just explode as soon as I hit a rock going way too fast through the rough sections. So I actually am very adamantly opposed to putting dropper posts on my own cross-country race bikes because that opens the door to ride the bike beyond its basically level of competency.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's probably a strong argument. I'm
kind of an anomaly in that.
Yeah, fair enough. I am not a racer. Like I'm one of those guys who I enter a race and I get so worked up that I'm just like, and then I do terrible in every single race because I'm just too amped. And
I could say that's half the fun of racing.
No, to me, it is all just stress. To all those people out there who like racing, congrats. Like, I am just that guy it's just not my thing. And it's funny because I got back into cycling kind of via the road triathlon race scene. And that's where I realized, like, this is way too intense for me. I need a beer and just a cruise on my bike. So... But it's funny. So I have a single speed hardtail, and I actually way overbuilt my wheels. In fact, they're Industry 9, the Enduro 305, so 30 mil wide rims and, big knobby tires. And granted, I love my Schwalbe tires, so they tend to be on the lighter side of tires, even though they're...
That's not a cross-country race bike. That's like more of like an all-around trail enduro style bike almost, right?
Yeah, but that's going to be the closest thing that I get to it. Okay. So I think that's where, even if I were to enter a race, I would say I'm going to play to my strengths there because my strength is not going to be about that nimble, sprightly climb stuff. Like I'm solid. I can pedal fast, but I'm going to get smoked by true cross country racers.
Yeah.
But where I could make up that difference is by playing to my strength and kind of overbuilding my bike a little bit and being able to take on people in that descent. So that's where I'm going to win if I'm racing. Luckily, I'm not, because that stresses me out. I'd still lose, too.
Yeah,
but that's all right.
Very, polarizing statements. So, I should probably say something really ridiculous, like, no hardtail should ever have a dropper seat post. But that's not the truth. So if you're building up a a rad shreddy hardtail like that, it would probably be killer in an enduro or a downhill race with the dropper seat post. But then if I was racing across country, I wouldn't want it. I just know that in cross country racing, the climbs are so much more important than all the other sections that I would need to go with the lightweight wheels, the lightweight tires, and the no dropper post would have to happen in order to make all the rest of the parts on the bike survive. So yeah, the type of racing, the type of riding you're doing has a lot into how you set up your stuff.
And I think that maybe asks the question then, because like Jeff, clearly you are a hell of a descender. Like you know how to throw your bike around all over the place, get totally, brapped out. Like we just watched one the other day where you literally tripled a set of jumps that I would have been jumping every single one of them individually, and you tripled this thing. I mean, you just sent it. It was unreal. So like clearly that's a strength. And so for my view on this, I think, man, yeah, put Jeff on this tiny, spindly little quick bike because he's already going to be fast on the downhills, right? Like that's already going to be his thing. But I've watched a lot of cross country races where the racer is actually pretty bad at descending. And you can see the seat post is like smacking them in the butt and throwing them over the bars. And they're like grabbing just heaps of brakes. And I wonder, like, for those people, maybe you add an extra 150 grams to your tire and you get a slightly tougher wheel. And maybe you do a dropper post, even if it's just a short one, get like something that drops 60 mil or something. And just kind of like play to that, the fact that that isn't your strength in that case, And so I wonder, I don't think there's a clear answer here. You got to figure out where the most gains are. And I think that was what was interesting about this video that I watched is they raced a couple of different people who had different strengths, and they tried to tailor their bikes to play to their weaknesses so that they could gain in those other areas. And it was funny because, the guy who was more downhill oriented was like, I'm not rocking a dropper post. I'm on these spindly things, but he was mobbing the downhills. Whereas the guy who was cross country guy actually did the dropper post stuff. And he ended up being quite a bit quicker because he was able to get that seat kind of out of his butt and, move the bike around a little faster on there. And so they actually ended up with real even times. Now, with that being said, the guy who was an XC racer still smoked him on the uphills. It was just a thing. But it was surprising that like you could see this kind of happen in real life. So now with this being said, we've talked about dropper posts, a little bit about wheel tire combo. We've talked about gears versus single speed, just a touch. Obviously we hit it as like a race thing, but if there was one component that you thought most clearly defined this type of thinking of either playing to your strengths or catering to your weaknesses, which one do you think is that component?
Just one component? I think it's the wheels with the tires on them. I think it's just the rotating mass right there. What do you think, Seth?
Yeah, I think that's the one that stands out the most. Again, I think in the racer context, that's the one that probably stands out the most because it is such a massive amount of rotating weight, And so you can really just feel the difference between a lightweight tire and wheel combo.
We have so many options in the wheel tire world now compared to years ago, too.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like, it wasn't that long ago where I might have said a short stem and a wide handlebar is more important. But now we kind of have seen that short stems can be climbed with properly, especially if you have a steep seat tube angle, and wider handlebars have kind of become the norm. So kind of interesting that things have progressed a lot recently here.
Yeah, it's funny. I've bought a couple of more cross-country oriented bikes in recent years, and they're coming with like 780 bars on them. And I'm like,
nice.
Oh man, I remember. Yeah, I'm like, those are a little wide for my body.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna have to chop that down a bit. But yeah, I think wheels are probably the most noticeable for me. I think I'm like a firm believer in dropper post, and I think that might be one of my most crucial pieces of playing to strengths or weaknesses, you know? And I realize like that one, you can't so much cater it, right? You're either a dropper post or you're not. You know, there's not like the wheel tire combo
too. Like I walk out my door here onto Galbraith, and 95% of bikes are going to have a dropper on them. And if it's that 5% that don't, 4% are people that don't have the money for a dropper post, and they just manually use their QR. And then 1% are actual, true, dyed-in-the-wool cross-country folks.
Yeah, fair enough. And thank goodness for several of these new brands that are popping out really good dropper posts at much more reasonable prices than we've seen in recent years.
I got to plug BMW components there because they
definitely please do.
are one of the characters that are doing that, and they help me out quite a bit.
And I think they've been helping to push this trend. Like I know from our sales at Jenson, like we kill it with BMW, and so it's great to see that they're pushing that market. So good on you guys. There's your plug. So awesome.
I'm saying that it's wheels and tires, and you're saying it's the dropper seat post. Do folks often like? So what I don't see on the supplier side is how often consumers are upgrading just a wheel set versus a complete bike. I got a little bit of info on that over the years, but it's hard for me to really say how often that's happening. Are you actually seeing folks calling in and asking what's a more aggressive or what's a less aggressive wheel set?
Yeah, I think, we saw that a bit back in the day, but I think there's a big resurgence on that.
Okay.
And I think part of what that is because we're able to get lighter, tougher, more capable wheel tire combos than pretty much ever before. And, granted, I still think tire tech has a long ways to come before we're just killing it with like innovative things. But man, I remember back in the day, my buddy Joe, hey Joe Yost, he had a it was a 2.6 or a 3.0 DH tire, and it was like triple ply and everything, so it was monstrous.
Triple ply.
Yeah, it was monstrous, and I don't even remember what tire it was. It was hanging in his garage, and I was like, dude.
26-inch or 24-inch diameter?
26, yeah. Okay. So, because this is back in the day, and I was like, dude, where do you even run this? Like, what's the point? And he was like, oh, it's for mammoth only, and it's because it's super rocky and da-da-da. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I was like, how much does it weigh? And he gave a number. I won't recall because I'm terrible with that. But I just remember being like, what the hell? Why would you ever put that on a bike? And now, like, you can pick up these 2.6 and 3.0 tires that are surprisingly light and still pretty darn tough. And I'm not saying they're as tough as that tire, but we're definitely getting to that point where wheel tire combos are becoming really hot for our customers to buy because they can take a bike that they love or that has treated them well or is in great shape and basically create a whole new experience with it just by swapping out the wheel tires.
You can make a bike a lot more capable with a wider rim and a modern good tire, and then you can make a modern enduro bike that's a pig on the climbs and the long rides. You can make it into way more of an all-day machine by downsizing, going to a lighter front tire, a more reasonable rear tire, and some carbon rims. So you can really push this one either direction, make a huge change.
Yeah, and there's tons of good options in wheels these days that are, relatively reasonably priced, especially when you consider the price of complete bikes.
Oh, totally.
It's real easy to justify buying a wheel tire combo, even if you add an extra cassette on there, so you don't have to swap it every time. Like you put your rotors, you just have it ready to go. You could have two different wheel sets that make your bike feel like night and day different. And I think we're seeing quite a bit of that with customers where it allows them, in a sense, to have the N+1 bike equation, but without having the +1 bike, So, I'm definitely a fan. And I've played around with this. I've mentioned it before. I had some 27.5 plus wheels that I was swapping back and forth with some 29er wheels on my hardtail. And I did that quite a bit, had a lot of fun with it. I definitely ended up settling on the 29ers as my more favorite thing. Okay. But it was really fun as an experiment to go through that. Yeah,
you learn a lot with the bigger tires for sure.
Yeah, so
I like just keeping my 29ers to 29s, and I love it when a 27.5 bike can be ridden with 27.5 plus. I just feel like 27 plus is so much closer to 27 normal, and the 29 versus 27, that's such a big difference that I don't like having the bottom bracket height change that much on a bike. Most of my bikes
Yeah.
are already so low, they end up getting too low pretty quick if I try to convert them.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You know, I was on a Mojo 3 with the Plus setup,
Cool.
and then I was on this hardtail, and you know, it was sweet because I could just swap them. But I had read all over, because this is pretty early on in the Plus 29er kind of movement of things. I was like reading all these things about, oh yeah, it's 27.5 Plus is almost the same as 29, and then I put them next to each other. I was like, not so much, guys. Like, so there's definitely a bottom bracket drop. You know, if you have them laying around, it's totally worth playing around with it. You know, I think it's a fun experiment. But for me, I definitely found that I catered back to the specific wheel size that was destined for that bike. So that was kind of my leaning. Yeah. But it was cool to see, though, that I could play around with the different tire wheel combos on that and just get a totally different feeling bike that played to different strengths or weaknesses that I had going on with that bike. So.
And a lot of this is getting used to the components, too. I remember back in like 2014, I was still building up really lightweight wheels on my bikes. So I was racing tons of enduros, and the courses weren't very tough back then. So I could do a lot better in the race by running these thinner little specialized tires. They were like 2.2, maybe a 2.3 on a big day, and 600 grams. And I was running a 1,300 gram Easton wheel set. And the thing was like a rocket ship up all these hills and on these flats, but I couldn't send it because those tires would tear. They were honestly pretty good for their weight, but I really couldn't send it. And I did flat a handful of times in races and definitely a ton while training. And you know, sitting on the side of the trail, putting a tube in and dealing with all that when you're supposed to be doing intervals and it's getting dark, it honestly cuts your workout short. And when you're working full time, you need all the time you can train. So,
right.
Yeah. Then I started to realize, you know, I need to go. I one of the EWSs up in Whistler. I remember noticing that all the top guys were on aluminum wheels and they all had freaking gnarly huge tires. And I was like, I'd learned that I could do really well on these more local races with the lighter setup, but the lighter setup couldn't even finish the race at the more aggressive, on the more world stage. So I started to try to just get used to the heavier tires and rims, and it took me, man, probably like 6 months, maybe even a good year to really get used to the full-on 1,100, 1,200 gram tires and the bigger, heavier rims. But that was so worth it because now I should knock on wood, but I do bring a spare tube most of the time. But definitely any ride shorter than 2 hours, I'm done bringing a spare tube. Those tires are burly enough. If I do somehow flat it, I can ride it home on a flat and it won't wreck the rim. And having the aluminum rims meant I could actually try lower pressure. So anytime it was raining and super slick out, it was a way better setup. And it just depends where you're going. If you're doing EWS courses, that makes a lot of sense. If you're riding your local trails, it's up to you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, right? Like the answer to this question is not one that we're going to be able to just give outright. There's no, at least in my opinion, there is not a definitive, hey guys, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to build your bikes.
Oh, the internet wants to hear that though.
Sorry guys, I'm going to let you down.
Wrong opinions on the internet. Oh goodness, I'm so sick of hearing them.
It's always fun to go to like Pink Bike and just read the comment section. You're like, oh wow, it's so definitive. But yeah, in this case, I don't know that we can do that because everybody's setup and situation is different. I'm just about to do my move from the Midwest back to the Pacific Northwest, and man, I have no idea what's going to happen with kind of my bike setups because I've been catering them so much to our local trails. And I love my local trails. They're super fun, tons of jumps, really interesting. But man, we have like superhero dirt with almost no rocks and like the occasional route here and there. And so,
climb.
The occasional one. There's not many.
It's a very different setup.
Yeah, it's funny because here, we've got these super punchy climbs that are like 50 to 75 feet. Like they're super short, but they're punchy. They're super steep and they're very frequent. Actually, you're in kind of these tight rolling hills, and hills is a way overstatement, rolling mounds. But because of that, you're constantly out of the saddle and you're pegged the whole time. So I built my bikes around kind of that intense it was like a high cardio sort of situation. You never sit down. For years
so you
lived
don't even
in
need
southern.
a dropper seat post. You just stand up all day.
No, we have so many good jumps, son.
Keep your seat down if you can just climb all these things standing up.
Well, and there was a lot of that because for a while I was in between dropper post, and I did exactly that. So, but with that being said, I was in California for years and years and years, and there, in the San Bernardino Mountains, we would literally start at the bottom of a climb and just climb for thousands and thousands and thousands of feet. And for the most part, you're just sitting and grinding away. And then you do these big descents. And so I found that when I moved here, I knew I was overbiked already, but I was like, I'll make this bike work. And then I started going, man, this riding is so different. I'm going to have to change up my bikes in order to cater to basically what were my weaknesses at that point. I had to tighten up some of my bars because we were riding in trees and stuff like that. And I had to change up my tire selection because the dirt was so grippy that I was actually oversteering into corners. And I actually went to much less grippy tires so that I could get that California drift that I was so used to. And
you want to turn up the fun factor. I like it.
Yeah, so it's been such an interesting experience, and now we're 4 years later getting ready to move back to the Northwest, but I haven't ridden the Northwest consistently in years, and so I think I'm going to go through this whole thing again of questioning.
Oh, you will,
okay,
for sure. You're going to love every second of it too.
Yeah, do I play to my strengths? Do I play to my weaknesses? How do I build my bikes according to that? And I think that's the fun in all this, right? Yes, you have to experiment and play around, but I think that's really what makes it so fun.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a never-ending, some people call it a money pit. I call it never-ending life experience. I don't know.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because I definitely have spent my fair share. The best thing is to just become a friend of mine, and then you get all the benefits of buying barely used bike parts from me experimenting with stuff for really cheap prices.
So one thing I think we've seen over the years here are discipline-specific bikes versus do-it-all bikes versus totally custom, very focused on your local region bikes. So you've built up a bunch of very specific for your region bikes. Are you going to try out some more traditional cross-country bikes, more downhill bikes when you get here to the Northwest? Or are you going to try and do more just everything bikes?
Yeah, so that's a question I've been wrestling with a fair bit. So I am getting on a on a Ripmo that I'll be picking up once I get over there.
Done. Your last bike ever. You won't need any more bikes.
That's kind of how I feel. I know that there's some big riding up in the Pacific Northwest, especially as you head up into Washington, Bellingham area. Kind of around where I'm going to be living, it's going to be a little bit more flow trail, but I still think that's going to be a massively efficient machine, even though it's got long travel fork and all that stuff going on. But I kind of raised this question in my head the other day of wanting to build up something that was like my park bike that could maybe be a little more rowdy. So I was thinking I was looking at the new MRP Bartlett and all that stuff that's coming out with the dual crown 170 fork and all that. I'm real curious about what that might look like as something that's not quite a downhill bike, but is kind of beyond a trail bike, and I don't know. I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but I think I'm going to probably have to build a bike or ride a bike that is more all around capable, because I do plan on, we picked up this Sprinter camper van that we've been building out over the last few months. And the plan is to drive all over and experience a ton of trails. And so I am going to look for a bike, and I think this is where the Ripmo lands, that can kind of just do it all pretty dang well. Gotcha. And so I think that's going to be my primary ride. But I have yet to throw a leg over it, so we'll see.
Throw a leg over the Ripmo, yeah, and try it out on your local trails. Man, having owned a Ripmo for 4 months now, I like having a couple other sketchier bikes on hand. I do have a more capable, longer travel HD4, and I've taken it out a couple of times, and it's been fun, but I was really jonesing for a sketchier, more out-of-control bike than the Ripmo, because honestly, spring conditions in the Northwest made riding too easy on the Ripmo. You had plenty of traction. It wasn't so slippery. You were holding on for, it wasn't so slippery and wet that you're just holding on the whole time. But at the same time, when it gets dry and dusty up here, our forest is not like the dry. Things get way more slippery in the summer than they are in the winter, which is kind of counterintuitive. So we're finally in the dusty season. I don't get to ride right now because of my broken shoulder, but for those 2 or 3 Goldilocks months there of like April through late May into the beginning of June, we're getting rain like once or twice a week, 3 times a week, just enough to keep it running good. I was missing the Mojo 3 and just how out of control you can get with those little wheels and not much suspension travel. I was riding all these trails that are like rated blue or single black, and they're fun, super fun on the Ritmo, totally enjoyable, but you know, like I knew I was going to get down it safely in one piece, and I kind of wanted to, you know, have that extra bit of adrenaline. You were looking for your California drift when you first got to the Midwest, and here I am looking for the same thing after riding the Ritmo is not too much to tone down. Like the HD4 tones down a lot of these trails that you really have to go breakneck speed to have fun. Ritmo is still fun at almost all the speeds, but you lose a lot of that just out of control feeling of the little wheels and less travel. So I kind of miss it.
So would you say in that situation then that you are using the Mojo 3 to basically play to your strengths in that it's challenging them, like because you are such a talented, you know, rider, that you're looking to make the bike a little less good? That sounds terrible. The Mojo's a great bike. I'm not trying to say it's less good.
Oh, it's a great bike.
But like you said,
I hadn't thought about it within this context, but I guess we could kind of apply this lens of build to your strength or hide your weakness. And, you know, like I wasn't really considering building it up to be a cross-country whippet. Like I'm not on the light side of things by any means. I'm like 160 pounds, and I should be like 135 pounds if I were to race cross-country. Mm-hmm. And so I was going to build the Mojo 3 up with a Fox 36 fork, a DPX2 rear shock. I've got some 742 wheels, like 2.5 tough casing tires. So it was going to have like the Bomber Enduro parts all over it. It was just built to be, I just wanted to make it wildly out of control and dangerous by having less travel and little wheels compared to the Ritmo. So I don't, maybe that is playing to my weaknesses and covering them up by making it a smaller bike. I don't know. I just was a different approach entirely.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I think it's definitely an interesting topic that we've landed on here. You know, if we were, let's do this, right? Internet loves definitive statements. So as Jeff Kendall Weed, if you were to say, give advice, and we're going to just, you know, make a fool of ourselves by giving a definitive statement, is it in a rider's best interest to accentuate their strengths, or is it in a rider's best interest to hide their weakness?
Without a doubt, accentuate your strengths. Play to your advantages. If you can't do something well and you want to learn at it, then try to get better at it. But if you're way better at one thing, run with it. That's if I learned anything over the years. If you're not a plumber, don't try to be a plumber. Hire someone else. Don't even deal with it. Just focus on what you're good at and build your bike up to accentuate what you're good at. You'll be happier, you'll live longer, you'll sleep better at night, everything will be better.
Yeah, well, shoot, I was really hoping you were going to say the other one, because that's what I was going to land on too. I'm going with accentuate your strengths. It's all about like having the absolute most fun and getting the most brap out of your ride. And so if your strengths are in one area, hit it hard a lot. Yeah. Now, with that being said, I think that's the N. And I think the hide your weaknesses is the +1. Totally. So if I have a recommendation, it is do N and then go +1. So that's it. I think I've made my definitive statement. Internet hecklers, unite and hit our comment section up.
Totally, yeah. Send us an email, podcast@jensonusa.com. Let us know how wrong we are. But, you know, in a racing perspective, if I was still racing a lot of enduros, I probably would be on a little bit lighter weight bike for the races. I would pull out the Ripley LS for a lot of the more local stuff. I would have small tires on it just because I know that those climbs, that if you have a 1-minute climb and there's a 20-minute total overall combined race time, that 1-minute climb is going to be what determines a lot of the finishing order. And so I'm happy to give up a second here, a second there on the gnarly parts that I have more fun riding in order to hide my weaknesses on that climb, because I've learned from experience, I've just learned that, I'm never going to win these races when I'm 30 seconds back on a climb and my bike's super heavy. If I can make up that 15 or 20 of those seconds with lighter wheels and tires, the little bit that I lose in the gnarly bits, yeah. But then on the flip side, I'm not getting any pictures on any websites when I'm on the ground and being all super conservative. And if you want to sell bikes, you got to get pictures online and in magazines. You got to get airborne. You got to get gnarly. So depends on your goals too.
Yeah, I guess it depends on which online bike publication is your favorite of the day. If you're really into Vital and all those kind of things, go to the Air. And if you're into going up, maybe we need to go to a whole different publication altogether. So. Sure. Cool. Well, I think that probably wraps up our talk here. We made our definitive statements, and it's been great catching up with you after your trip, and we wish you all the best in healing up and getting back on the bike.
Great to chat with you too, Seth. Good luck with your upcoming trip over here to the West Coast.
Yeah, so with that being said, we might be a couple of weeks out before our next episode just because I will be moving and on the road for several weeks while I cruise across the U.S., checking out cool places and hopefully getting in some rides. And then Jeff and I will get back together and hit some more episodes.
Yeah, we're going to keep working on these. If you guys have any other topics you want us to discuss, please email them to us, podcast@jensonusa.com. Be sure to follow the Jenson USA Instagram or Facebook pages and join their email newsletter for an additional heads up when we have a new episode out.
Yeah, for sure. And then make sure you check out Jeff's Instagram and YouTube channel. This guy, even when he's injured, is blowing up with super cool content. He just had one where he did a Fox rear shock rebuild that's super dope. And it's way helpful. That kind of stuff is stuff that you guys can learn how to do and do it confidently and keep your bikes running super dialed. So Jeff is just killing it every week. Make sure you subscribe to his Instagram and YouTube channels. Get inspired by his writing, his education, all that kind of stuff. He's just absolutely killing it. So for now, just remember, keep pedaling.